It ain't necessarily so. It ain't necessarily so. The things that you're liable to read in the Bible ain't necessarily so. Methuselah lived 900 years. Methuselah lived 900 years. But what good is living when no gal will give in to no man what's 900 years? It ain't necessarily so. It ain't necessarily so. The things that you're liable to read in the Bible, it ain't necessarily so. So I was a pastor in a mainstream denomination of churches for 20 or 30 years, and to the best of my recollection, I avoided arguments about inerrant and infallible and is the Bible literally true, or is it true in a different kind of way, and all that stuff. To me, the Bible is stories, and the stories have meaning, many different meanings depending on your point of view, I suppose, and that's their value and their truth. It's the truth that it means to the people who hear them and use them and find themselves through those stories. And maybe for you it's much more vital than that, or much more specific. That's okay. It's just that when I'm talking about the Bible, it's as a story, a collection of stories. And as far as the four Gospels are concerned, it's one story woven so intricately and so beautifully, so artistically, that I don't think any human being could ever have put that together on their own. Each of the four Gospels is like that, and the four together is like that. I believe what's found there is the mark of the Holy Spirit. It's way more, the Gospels are way more elaborate and beautiful and stunning than Handel's Messiah, or all the works of Beethoven put together, or all the writings of your favorite, bestest author ever. It's way more inspiring than the Star Wars set story, or anything else that I've ever heard of and seen on this earth in terms of literature. And it's full of meaning, which those other stories aren't necessarily, although one can say that art and meaning is the same thing. And you can say that inspiration and magic is the same thing. So just to keep that in mind, that if I refer to a story and it's not quite the way it's written in such and such book of the Bible, well, I take my liberties with it. The Bible sets me free to take liberties even with the Bible. What matters is, am I hearing the song, and am I living the song? And if I'm not, well, something will come along and correct me. Love is now to be among you at the calling of your hearts. Rest assured this troubadour is acting on love's part. The union of your spirits here has caused love to remain forever. Two or more of you are gathered in his name. Well, there's love. Yes, there's love. Well, a man shall leave his mother, and a woman leave her home, They shall travel on to where the two shall be as one. As it was in the beginning, is now until the end. Woman draws her life from man and gives it back again. And there's love. Yes, there's love. Well then, what's to be the reason for becoming man and wife? Is it love that brings you here, or love that brings you life? If loving is the answer, then who's the giving for? Do you believe in something you've never seen before? Well, that's love. Yes, that's love. Oh, the marriage of your spirits here has caused him to remain. For wherever two or more of you are gathered in his name, well, that's love. Well, that's love. I'm not trying to sell you anything or talk you into anything or change your mind or your church membership or tell you how to raise your kids or your parents. I'm just singing this song for you to be happy. So today's song, this part of the song, is about redeeming. And redeeming is not a word that we use very much in our ordinary conversation. My mother used to have S&H green stamps, and she redeemed them for different kinds of little prizes or so on. And I've noticed Albertsons and some of the other stores maybe are reverting to that technique. It was good for the people to feel, you know, licking the stamps and putting them in the little book, taking the books down, and we have 4 books, we need 4.5 to get the ice cream maker or whatever we were getting. That was a fun game. But redeeming is a word we don't use much anymore, even for green stamps or things like that. It's very similar to claiming, only there's something missing if you use the word claiming that's present if you use the word redeeming. Claiming is kind of like one-sided. Not just like I claim to be something that I'm not, but if I'm the owner of a football team and I draft somebody, claim them to be part of my team, and there's a negotiation dialogue about the terms of that and so on. But still, it's kind of one directional. But redeeming has something much more holistic and much more mutual, much more giving and giving and taking and taking. It's a spiritual thing, not a only material thing. And I've been struggling with this for a while. I know what the stories are. I'm going to tell them briefly in just a minute, the biblical stories. But the part I struggle with is redeeming always mutual? And is mutual redeeming necessary, without which it's not redeeming, without which I've missed the point of those stories that I'm about to tell now. So You have the list of names that the book of Matthew opens with, and you get down to one that says Boaz and Ruth. And you can go back and read the story of Boaz and Ruth, primarily in the book of Ruth. The story that goes with that is in the book of Matthew itself, the story of Jesus, as we're told. Jesus is walking along by the edge of the Sea of Galilee and sees two fishermen. Those are commercial fishermen, with the long boat and the nets and so on. Sees two fishermen and calls them, and immediately they drop what they're doing and come and follow him. And he goes a bit further down the beach there, and he sees two more fishermen with their father. And he says, "Come and follow me, and I'll make you fishers of people," or something like that. They jump out of the boat, even their father. They leave, and it says very specifically in the text, they left their nets and their father and followed Jesus. So on one level you can say, Jesus was picking his crew for the Sandlot football match. He claimed them. But on a deeper level, he redeems them from a good life. He didn't rescue them from some hovel in a big city somewhere, slums. He claims them, he redeems them from a good enough life into something better. And he is redeemed by doing that. Jesus is redeemed by redeeming those four people whom he makes disciples. That's the way the story continues. So back to the first story. Boaz and Ruth get married. Now Boaz, you remember from the earlier story, Boaz was the son of a guy whose name is Peaceful, and a woman who's wild, and was the the prostitute, the town prostitute, to the Israelites. And only her immediate family did she save. She got a whole city wiped out, and all the donkeys and the chickens and everything, in order to be redeemed by the Israelites, by this one particular one, but by their whole clan, to become an Israelite, to become what we would call later on, much later on, a Jew. She betrays her whole clan, her whole city, to bind herself to, and Boaz is the child of that union. So in vulgar parlance, he's a half-breed. He's a biracial child. And the story somehow implies that he inherits a large piece of land and is well-to-do and has lots of servants and all kind of land holdings, but he remains a bachelor, and that's never really explained why, but it's very important to the story. So here's this 40-year-old bachelor guy who falls in love with Ruth. Ruth is not Israelite. She's not Jewish. She's born in Jordan. The backstory on that is there was a woman, Naomi, an Israelite, who went to Jordan and married there, a Jordanian, and had 2 sons. And they had a little family of 6, and then something happened, and the Jordanian dies, and both of the sons die. They're half Jordanian. They all die, and there's no children. And Naomi decides that she will go back to Israel, but there's nothing for her in Jordan, she believes. There's no inheritance, there's no land to live on, there's no children to take, grandchildren to take care of. And as she's going back to Israel, both of the daughters-in-law, who are now widows, they say, we'll go with you. Nothing here for us either. Wherever you go, I will go. And they set out together, but after a little while, one of the daughters-in-law turns back. And but the second one, Ruth, goes with Naomi all the way back to Israel, and it's a tough journey. When they get there, they got nothing. They're gleaners, and a gleaner is a little bit more than a beggar. And a gleaner is somebody who, after the men have come through and harvested a crop of barley or oats or something, they get to go through and glean what's left. And it's like living off of scraps. But Naomi is very clever and insightful, and Naomi is actually a distant cousin of Boaz. And when they're gleaning and they come to the fields that kind of go through, just like we do with harvests up in the Midwest in America now, the harvesters and the gleaners would work through an area. And when they get to Boaz's land and they're working on there, Naomi arranges for Ruth to meet Boaz in very sketchy kind of way, and Boaz falls in love, and he redeems Ruth and Naomi by buying some land that they own that's not worth nothing, and he pays a good price to get it. He gets it from another cousin of his, and so on. A complicated story, but he redeems the land and Naomi and her daughter-in-law, Ruth. And they live together and have a child. And so the story goes on. So in getting married to each other, it looks like here's this rich guy who redeems this poor little orphan character, and desperate gleaner, beggar, redeems her. But in the unfolding of the story, she redeems him. She saves him from whatever psychological influences caused him to be a bachelor, even though he had all of the accoutrements to, to kind of take his pick of the girls of the valley or something like that, but he doesn't. And she redeems him, you could say, by going after him, but it's deeper than that. And it's not like you can read the story and see it, but if you read the story and you get into it and you let your imagination carry you, you let the song carry you, and you remind yourself this is a love song, and you let the song remind you this is a song about love, and one part of love is redeeming and being redeemed. And it's the same thing. Redeeming and being redeemed is the same thing. So you're out on the street somewhere, coming out of a restaurant or into a store or whatever, and there's somebody there who's begging for $1. And most likely if he or she gets that $1, they're going to buy booze with it. And the natural human tendency is either to blow them off or scold them, or to have pity on them. Oh, poor thing. And to feel like there's this gulf between you and that human being over there. And to not feel anything solid and real and loving towards this person. And when we do that, when we don't redeem and be redeemed, we miss out. And if you give them $1 and you look in their eyes, something happens. And you see, there but for fortune go you and I. There but for fortune, but for luck is you. And this may be easier for people who are actually recovering alcoholics or drug addicts or something to recognize somehow I quit and he or she didn't. And to be grateful for whatever magic in the world, whatever magic in life redeemed you from being a helpless wretch, a drunk, a dirty person on the sidewalk begging for $1 to take away the shakes that they're having in the morning. Something will happen. And that something is love. Who's the giving for, says the song. Who's the giving for? Are you giving them $1 so they won't look at you that way? You're giving them $1 because you're embarrassed. Giving them $1 because you feel sorry for them. Or is that person in their poverty and wretchedness allowing you a chance to be redeemed? Once there was a funeral in a state hospital up in northwest in Washington State. And the person had been, it was a veterans hospital. The person had been dying for several weeks and months that they were in there. They'd already sort of drunk up their liver, as we say in the vernacular. They'd ruined their internal organs to the point where they were not going to recover. And dying was inevitable. And the person, the old man that was dying, was irascible and always cussing at the staff members and pinching them or trying to hit them and just mistreating me, just bad guy all the way around. And the young chaplain, it was not me, by the way, the young chaplain went to do his funeral there in the hospital, and a few staff members showed up, little old Catholic ladies or whatever, a few people, but not many. And the preacher's going through his regular routine chaplaincy thing, and somehow magic, love got hold of him. And he started talking to the guy in the casket. And he said, "You redeemed me." He used that passage from the Bible that talks the sheep from the goats. It's a parable that Jesus tells and says in the end times the king will come in and he'll separate his people like the sheep from the goats. And he'll say to the one, "Welcome to heaven." And to say to the other, "Welcome to hell. Because you didn't take care of me." He used that text, the preacher did, and then he said that the old guy in the box was one of the sheep that was welcomed into heaven. And this is a guy who, if you knew anything at all about the history, you can say he never did nothing right in his whole life. Alienated his family, on and on. But those of us who were in the audience kind of went, huh? And he repeated himself, the young chaplain said, "You redeemed me because I was a drunk on the street begging, and you gave me a dime." And it doesn't even say in the chaplain's narrative, it doesn't even say whether he looked at him with kindness or experienced that magic moment that I'm talking about. It doesn't say anything about that. Just that for whatever reason, the dead drunk gave a dime to another drunk. And it redeemed him. Now, this is not the way the church collective sees this story or lots of other stories that I tell. And the question is whether you'll see it that way or not. Will it be to you? I mean, if you can hear the song in here, there's no way that I or anybody else can explain redeeming. We can only tell stories about it, because stories is all we got. But stories is enough. If it's this story, especially this story of love, the song of love, that the source of magic is singing to us through the book of Matthew, through the whole gospel, through the whole Bible, to hear that song, to be lifted up and carried by that song, you don't have to think or talk or argue about what's redemption anymore. The song itself redeems you. The song itself is redemption. Boaz and Ruth marry each other and they are mutually redeemed. It's not just a rich guy taking care of this orphan girl, this widow, somebody else's ex-wife. It's Boaz finding himself in her, and her finding herself in him. So Jesus is walking along beside the lake there, a beautiful lake I've heard, and calls these four guys. Calls them to come with him. And in the surface story, it means he's going to make disciples of them, and they're going to go wandering around all over the place and preaching the gospel and doing all these things, sleeping out on the ground a lot and so on. That's what it looks like on the surface. But inside, where the song is really sung, Jesus is redeeming himself by calling them from good enough life to the mystery of redemption. And whether they see even a glimpse, the four of them, whether they see even a glimpse of that or not at the time, there's no mention. It just says immediately they dropped what they were doing and went after him, went with him, joined themselves to him. And that's the truth. Show me the whiskey stains on the floor. Show me the drunkard as he staggers out the door. And I'll show you, young man, with so many reasons why, that but for fortune go you or I. Show me the alley, show me the train, show me the hobo as he sleeps out in the rain. And I'll show you, young man, with so many reasons why, there but for fortune go you and I, you and I. Show me the prison, show me the jail, show me the prisoner whose life has gone stale. And I'll show you, young man, with so many reasons why, there but for fortune go you and I, you or I. Show me the country where the bombs had to fall. Show me the ruins of the buildings once so tall. And I'll show you, young man, with so many reasons why, that but for fortune go you and I, you and I.